This is my video for YouTube for Billy's Mysteries of the Unknown. And this one, it's about domestic violence. To all people, if you've ever wondered how domestic violence really happens, here's how it happens in real life. You remember watching Power Rangers growing up in the early 90s? You remember Tommy, who was played by Jason David Frank, was chosen by Rita to be the Green Ranger? And then she had him touch a special green wax to steal his powers if he turned against her, especially if they broke the spell? Well, in real life, it kind of works the same way. You ever heard the expression, no strings attached? Well, don't be fooled when someone says that. Why? Because they're lying to you. There are strings attached, especially if you turn against them. And domestic violence is a good example. Here's how it works. Most women and young girls who've been hurt by abusive men were not random people. They were chosen. How do they do it? Well, a lot of times they can, if they're on social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube or Twitter, they start to watch them. They observe every move they make and ask questions. And if they find out that they will fight back because of people who know them personally, they ask, they'll leave them alone. Why? Because they don't want women like that. They want somebody who just gives in. If they find out they will give in, especially from what they've seen or heard from people who especially know them, they take advantage. What they do is they pretend to love them. And they act like they're their whole world. When in reality, it's a lie. And then a lot of times the woman is unaware that they're not a good person. And this guy is either a drug addict, or worst of all, a murderer, or a cold-blooded woman beater. She's tricked into having a child. And then she'll try to hide the baby, unaware that her family or close friends suspect she might be pregnant. And then they see the signs and they eventually admit it. And a lot of times they'll ask who the father is. And they don't trust the father, and for good reason. When they have their victim move in from their family and friends, such as their parents, here's why they do it. They do it because they want them to be away from their family and friends. Why? So they can take advantage and there'll be no one to protect them. Especially when they show their true colors at their place. And when they say they're being good to them and the child, they work for a living and stuff, don't be fooled by that. Why? Because it's a trick. That's how they manipulate them. And just like a shark circling around its prey, abusive men, for example, do the same thing to their victim. And then after they have the child, things turn from good, and then they eventually show their true colors. They start becoming very controlling and possessive over them, telling them what they can and can't do and who they can and can't be around. And they won't let them have opinions. And a lot of times they'll say only they care about them, none of their family and friends do. And a lot of times they can say, if you break up with me, go to somebody else, or you especially tell the cops on me, I'm going to kill you, is what they'll do to keep them from leaving them. And when they leave them, what happens? There's strings attached. Just like what Rita did with Tommy on the Power Rangers. But first, a lot of times they want their victim to suffer. And one of the ways is when they take it out on their family or friends or anyone close to them, that's a way to make their victims suffer. And then try to make them feel bad for what happens. And if they get in an argument with their ex-girlfriend or wife, they hope the children are around. Why? So they can try to manipulate and brainwash them. Because why do you think they'll say, the child will say, Mommy, why'd you make Daddy hate me? Because they're doing that because they want the child to be brainwashed, and they can use the child like a shield to, you guessed it, keep them from coming near them, because with the child with them, there's nothing they can do because they don't want to hurt the kid. And they usually do this when the kid's old enough to understand this stuff. One of the ways they can do it, they can trick them right before they have the child. They say, what happens if one of us was to pass away, or both of us? They can trick them into signing an adoption paper. If they cover it, they say, don't like this, or say, don't look. They don't want them to know that it's not an insurance, it's an adoption paper that gives them legal custody. The second strategy of this, they can make up false claims saying that they and their family, including their stepdad or their grandparents or aunts and uncles or other people, family members close to them, have been mean to them, and people on the abusive ex-husband or boyfriend side can confirm it's true when really it's not. Or the third strategy, it's what my friend Amber calls by love. They can, if they're old enough to understand, like I said, and if a very special holiday is around the corner, such as Christmas or their birthday, if there's a toy or something their mom doesn't want them to have because if it's too expensive or for some kind of other reason, and if they hear about it, they will take advantage to try to brainwash the child. And then once that happens, the child can be brainwashed into thinking the mom doesn't care, but only the father does, because they gave the child what they wanted, what the mom would never let them have. And unless they can be convinced it's a setup, they could end up losing that child for life. And you may ask, well, what if they can't get the child back? Well, they'll move on to a new victim, just like Rita did with Catherine. But to make sure that their victim doesn't know, not only will they target the mom, but the child or children will be targets too. Why? To keep them from blowing the whistle. That's why they do it. And always remember that most abusive men, if they've done it to you, for example, and you think you're their first victim, always remember you're probably not their first or second. They probably have a history of doing it. And most abusive men who've hurt young women, for example, you guessed it, have done it before. They either have a history of abusing other young girls or women and children, or they've been involved with drugs or threatening people. In most domestic violent cases. So what can you do to protect a loved one? You ask from their ex-husband or boyfriend, especially if you start to see the signs that they're not who you think they are. First, always remember, trust your gut feeling and instinct. Especially when if you know it sounds too good to be true and they barely know them. Always be vigilant as well. Pay attention to what's going on around you and around whoever in your family or close friends have been tricked by this so-called lover. Second, ask around and check their background to see if they have been in trouble with the law or if they're abusive or not. And if you hear from people who know them, such as an ex-girlfriend, wife, people that used to be friends with them, or people in town that know them very well, or the police have come forward, you better pay attention to that. And also if you can't warn them, warn somebody close to them, that like their parents, or maybe close friends, or a brother or sister, or an uncle or aunt, or somebody close to them, and let them know that they're not good people. You just found out from other sources. You've checked their background, and some people have come forward and have confirmed your suspicion that they're abusive. And never ignore that and just say, no big deal. Because you need to warn them, because if you don't, you could put your friend or a family member in danger, including the children, especially when they show their true colors. And remember, it'll make you just as bad if you don't tell the truth. Always trust your gut feeling and instinct. If you especially know or suspect this person and your family or close friends that they're wanting to marry, date, or have kids with is not a good person. then these will help. I'm Billy McNeely for Billy's Mysteries of the Unknown. Remember what I just said, and may God be with all his children always.